Hey guys, this mini lecture will go through a little bit of the nose. So we'll start off with the bones in the nose. If any of you are into soccer, you'll know what a formation is. I've kind of broken up the bones of the nose in terms of that so that we can remember them. So it's a 2-4-2 formation, which means there's 8 bones that make up the lateral wall of the nose, the floor of the nose, and the roof of the nose. The medial wall of the nose is made of the septal cartilage, so I've taken it out here so that we can see all the other anatomy. So most superiorly, we have the nasal bone and the frontal bone, so that's the 2. And then in the middle, we have the maxilla, the lacrimal bone, the ethmoidal bone, and the sphenoid bone. So that's the 4, MLES. And then inferiorly, we have the inferior concha and the palatine bone. So we'll do that one more time. Nasal bone, frontal bone, maxillary bone, lacrimal bone, ethmoidal bone, sphenoid bone, inferior concha, and the palatine bone. So those are the 8 bones that make up the lateral wall, the floor, and the roof of the nose. And medially, we have the septal cartilage, so it's not here. Okay, moving on to the arterial and nervous supply of the nose. We can break it up into lateral and medial. So we can see medially, it runs along the septa, and then laterally it just stays along the lateral wall of the nose. So medially, we can, once we've broken it up medially and laterally, we can break it up anteriorly and posteriorly. Anteriorly, we have the anterior ethmoidal nerve. So that'll be up here, or up here, technically. Anterior ethmoidal nerve, and then these little branches we won't worry about. But that actually supplies the lateral and the medial wall. So anteriorly, it's the anterior ethmoidal nerve, both laterally and medially. And then posteriorly and medially, we have the nasopalatine nerve. The nasopalatine nerve, or it's otherwise known as the long sphenopalatine nerve. The long sphenopalatine nerve. And that runs through the sphenopalatine foramen from the pterygopalatine ganglion, and runs along the septal cartilage, and goes into the incisive canal, and it provides sensory innervation to the front of the palate here, the front 3 teeth and the hard palate, from canine to canine bilaterally. Laterally, we have the greater palatine nerve, which gives off 2 branches. So the greater palatine nerve comes from the pterygopalatine ganglion, and it gives off 2 branches. It gives off a posterior superior lateral nasal branch. So posterior superior lateral nasal branch, and a posterior inferior lateral nasal branch. So they pretty much tell you where they're going to run. This program has it listed a bit differently. So this is the posterior superior lateral nasal branch. Comes off the greater palatine nerve before it enters the greater palatine foramen down here, and supplies the hard palate. So that's the posterior superior lateral nasal branch, otherwise known as the short sphenopalatine. So the long sphenopalatine is the nasopalatine nerve. The short sphenopalatine is the posterior superior lateral nasal branch. And then inferiorly, we have the posterior inferior lateral nasal branch, and that runs along the inferior nasal concha, and that also comes from the greater palatine nerve. So that's the nervous supply, or the nervous innervation. We also have the arterial innervation here. Now the arterial innervation kind of follows the venous innervation, or the venous supply. Sorry, not the venous, the nervous supply. Anteriorly, we have the anterior ethmoidal arteries, which is also broken up here. So both laterally and medially, we have the anterior ethmoidal arteries. You can break it up into medial and lateral if you want. So that one and that one. Posteriorly, we have the posterior ethmoidal arteries, or the posterior ethmoidal artery. Now, these two branches come off the ophthalmic artery, which is the first, or which is one branch of the internal carotid artery as it enters the brain. The ophthalmic artery enters the optic canal and gives the anterior ethmoidal and the posterior ethmoidal. Okay, so that's the that's one supply. We also have the sphenopalatine artery, which is the termination of the maxillary artery. Sphenopalatine artery, or otherwise known as the nasopalatine artery, that runs along with the nasopalatine nerve and also runs into the incisive canal. So that's either the sphenopalatine artery or the nasopalatine artery. And finally, we have, that's also part of the sphenopalatine. And finally, we have some branches from the facial artery, which comes up here. So this is the superior labial artery from the facial artery. The superior labial artery of the facial artery. And then it comes into the nose and supplies the septa. There's also an alar branch, which supplies like the wing of the nose. And essentially the anterior ethmoidal, the sphenopalatine, and the alar and septal branches of the facial, they form a little plexus here known as Little's plexus. And that's a common area where nosebleeds can occur. But yeah, so that's the nose. I'll just run through some other things quickly. So we have obviously these three concha, the superior, middle, and inferior concha. The inferior concha is its own bone. The middle and superior are just projections of the ethmoid bone. Deep to each one, or technically it's superficial, but within each one there's a little sort of like a gap or a fossa. This is a meatus, of which things can drain into. So in the inferior meatus, the nasolacrimal duct drains into it. In the middle meatus, or the middle meatus, there's something known as hiatus semilunaris. Hiatus semilunaris, I believe it's due to its shape, sort of semilunar. And this drains three things. Anteriorly, it drains frontal sinus. In the middle, it drains the anterior and middle ethmoidal air cells. And posteriorly, it drains the maxillary sinus. In the superior meatus, the posterior ethmoidal air cells are drained. It's just up there. Also, this is the sphenopalatine foramen, where the nasopalatine artery and nerve come out of. So that's the sphenopalatine foramen. But yeah, as I was saying, and this is the sphenoid sinus here. So the sphenoid sinus drains in the sphenoethmoidal recess, but the posterior ethmoidal air cells drain into the superior meatus. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that. Otherwise, I would have to make another video. But yeah, just a brief introduction to the nose. But yeah, thanks for listening.